Japan going to handle this information?
Yes, because family lineage is huge.
And he's the number one son in his clan. The pressure. Luckily, he said, that's really interesting. What's for dinner? I've told that story so many times. At the time, I thought, you insensitive son of a bitch. But now I think it's delightful.
It's delightful.
And I tell 15 or 14-year-old girls at Children's Hospital who are so convinced they're unlovable, unacceptable, sweetheart, if there's scalloped potatoes and pork chops percolating away in the oven, it doesn't matter what chromosomes you have.
Right, that's great. You're talking to a guy who was raised in the South, and the weight of my heart is definitely through my stomach, so yes, I agree.
Oh, and that's grits and collard greens, right?
Oh yeah, and a good pot roast. Yes. I missed my Nana's pot roast for sure. But you're right. So what's interesting about the chromosome thing is now where we are in this world of science.
Yeah, we know now.
Well,
we can find
there's so many more. Now they've found so many more combinations.
Oh,
too.
absolutely.
See, that's interesting. Before, remember, I always remind myself that at one time the smartest minds of the day, the people that the world considered brilliant thought the world was flat.
Yes.
So this is important for all of us to remember. Because where we were in 1970, when you found this out?
78 maybe?
78. We know so much more, and yet I think we're still just scratching the surface of the complexity of gender.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But them undoing the genome has just opened this up.
In 1940, if you were a woman like me, you would never know that you had XY chromosomes because that science wasn't developed till the 50s, maybe the late 50s. And so you wouldn't go around torturing yourself with this knowledge that I should be XX, but I'm really XY. But because I was a young woman in the time that I was, this information was presented to me, and that was like a scarlet letter, like a shroud, like it was a big deal. And I keep having to remind myself that if I'd only been 20 years before that, I would never have known that.
Yeah. You would have just figured out at some point you were having trouble trying to have a child if you wanted to have a child. Yeah. So, that's really interesting. So, is it better to know or not to know?
That's a really good question, because when I'm trying to bring doctors along on this journey with me, they'll seize on the fact that I had angst because of the knowledge. That gets translated in their minds that the knowledge is too painful and upsetting, therefore withhold the information.
Right.
No. Reveal the information, honor my angst, offer psychological assistance.
Yes, and this was done in the intersex community to babies. Like when I was born in the 1960s, you were born in the 1950s, and there were many babies that when they could tell on the outside that they were intersex, or at the time they used the word hermaphrodite, they would surgically correct the baby, sometimes without even telling the parents. And never telling the child, and there are many horror stories that came along with that because some of those children grew up not fitting the way, and they would just surgically correct the easiest, whatever was the easiest to do.
Maria Pettinato, who's at Seattle U in the Masters of Nursing program, always encourages me to say this. It says in some medical textbooks that you always feminize a child with ambiguous genitals because, quote, it's easier to dig a hole than it is to build a pole.
It's very true. We actually, we even say that in the transgender community, right? Because in the transgender community, trans women, the surgeries, the bottom surgeries are far more successful and amazing. Like I have a trans woman dear friend that speaks with us sometimes, that went to a gynecologist who the gynecologist couldn't even tell she was trans. All the gynecologist asked was, when did you have your hysterectomy?
Yeah.
That's how good the surgeries are. But they're not anywhere is good for trans men, the bottom surgeries.
Right.
And there's also, it's also, we're talking about such a minority, the T's and the I's, we're such a small community that we don't also get a lot of funding to move these things forward.
Interestingly enough, I've been told by funders that it's not sexy enough, which I think is terribly ironic.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you're pretty sexy.
I think so too.
I think we're pretty sexy. I think they should give us more money.
Yes.
Yes. So then what took you from there, from 24, finding this out, and I know you had to go through processing and this journey. How did then, and when did you share with the rest of your family?
Well, there's lots of questions there and lots of history there. From finding out at 24, when my reaction was so visceral, so primal scream, I scared myself because I had, being the oldest child in my family and in a somewhat wacky, dysfunctional family, I was the one that held it all together and arbitrated disputes and all sorts of stuff. So I scared myself, like, I'm going batshit crazy here. So I shut down and remember Johnny Carson, the answer is under a Funkin' Wagnall's porch, wrapped in duct tape and a mayonnaise jar. That's where it stayed for about 25 years. But any psychologist or social worker will tell you when a trauma is not dealt with, not acknowledged, it's going to manifest itself some way. So my drug of choice happened to be Haagen-Dazs, but it could have easily been something else. And I threw myself into school and to work. And we talked about overachieving, or I mentioned, So there's a cause and effect thing going on here. I have so many friends like me who were university professors, lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. There's a reason for that. So I lived in mortal fear of being found out, like something really horrific was going to happen to me if I was found out. In retrospect, I think that's kind of funny because it's a kind of an arrogant thing. Like, people are lying in wait to ruin my life. Like, I think they've got better things on their mind now, but I really was buying into that. Here's a stupid thing. I used to buy a lot of Liz Claiborne clothes when I worked in an office, but Liz Claiborne's policy about the label, the ticket, it says color 906. And I've always wanted to write Liz Claiborne a letter saying, I'm colorblind, 906 doesn't mean a goddamn thing to me. But interestingly, I was always told as a kid only boys are colorblind, which is not true statistically. But every time my colorblindness came up, it was going to out me, and it caused me great anxiety.
Wow. So interesting, the little things we hold on to, right, that we hear as a child.
Haunted me. Interestingly, I'm wearing all black today, only for convenience. I tried about 18 things on, but I do wear colors now. And I'm not afraid to ask the sales clerk, what color is this? But there you go. I have worn purple and navy blue together many times, I'm sure, but I might create a new fad kind of thing. So my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he lived on a little island in Canada, and it took me 8 or 9 hours to get there, and I had to slow down during that phase of my life, and I had never slowed down enough. And one night I took the last ferry, and the moon was shining on the full moon was shining on the water, and it was very poetic. And I had an epiphany. Lying and hiding is not serving me very well. It's actually having a very, very negative effect on my health and my mental well-being, etc., because I never took care of myself. When you're in this scenario, and you may have friends in the trans community who don't love themselves, they don't take care of their temple very well.
Yes.
Smoking, substance abuse,
right.
No exercise, not eating regularly. Often I'd go 18 hours without eating and things, stupid things like that. And then watching my dad slip away really brought my own mortality into focus a little bit, as it does when you have aging parents. And that was the beginning. And isn't it amazing how things go click, 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 click? My friend Cindy at Indiana University sent me a press release from the Intersex Society of North America, who had just opened a brick and mortar office in the U District in Seattle. And I had just got a work authorization to work in the United States, being Canadian, which is not an easy thing to do, by the way. And for some unknown reason, I sent a letter to the Intersex Society saying, I am intersex, and I would love to volunteer. Well, they hired me as the office manager, and it was like Mr. Toad's wild ride from that point on. Oh my God! And immediately after that, I went to my first support group meeting in St. Louis, and I walked into the room, and I said literally, this room is full of gorgeous babes, I must be okay. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's the dialogue that was going in my friend Susie from Oklahoma came into the room an hour late because she'd gone to the Baptist Women's Quilting Convention and didn't realize she was in the wrong room. So the takeaway message there is, Mac, you can't pick us out of a crowd.
No, you can't.
And I've been wrong every time I thought I could pick one of us out of a crowd. And I've met more intersex people than probably just about